Hey guys, it's Bethany and welcome back to... Wait, that's not my intro. Hey guys, it's Bethany from Beth and Books and welcome back to this book nook. And today I'm coming at you with the second half of my April wrap-up, and this month has been an entire month in self-isolation, and the way I have been escaping is via books. To the point where I have read 20 books this month, which blows my mind, cannot comprehend what even is 20. A lot of them were slightly disappointing, if I'm being real. The ones that I gave the lowest stars were ones that I had really high hopes for, and I've decided to run this video a little bit different to my previous wrap-ups in that I'm going to start with my lowest rated to my highest rated. I have my notes because reality check, I can't remember absolutely everything in my head. Okay, books I gave 2 stars. First of all was an ARC I received called Beach Read. This is written by Emily Henry and I received this very gratefully from NetGalley and Penguin Books, and this comes out next month on the 19th of May. The blurb and the book cover kind of promises you that this is going to be a summery, light-hearted, romantic, 2 authors getting to know each other, swapping their genres to write their book, get it done. That's not what it's like, and that's where my biggest critique is. I wanted this book because it looked like it was set on a beach in summer, lots of sunshine. Instead, there are some pretty heavy trigger warnings and it gets quite dark.
So I did the worst job ever of articulating my thoughts around the darkness of this book, so let me give it another go here. Essentially what happens is Augustus takes January out to the remains of what used to be a cult's area of living to do research for her literary fiction novel, and the campsite is burnt down, people died, and then there's interviewing of the victims' families, and it just gets way too intense and definitely not what this cover kind of promises you.
So really there's some expectation issues, and I think the marketing team might need to be very careful in the future if they don't already rejig it. My next 2-star read is #Murder Trending by Gretchen McNeil. This one for me was just annoying. We follow our main character Dee, and she wakes up, she's in this warehouse and she's going to be executioned for a crime she didn't commit, so she has to run away and try to survive, kind of Hunger Games style, where she meets up with other people. And what happens is that Dee is stupid. So stupid, I just couldn't wrap my brain around it. She starts off saying, I will get revenge for my stepsister who was murdered. And so you're like promised this mystery, and she does absolutely nothing productive to work towards it. There's cameras everywhere because what's happening is like live streamed to the world population. Hence another kind of Hunger Games reference there. So yeah, there are cameras everywhere watching every move, and obviously if they want to try and break the system, they can't talk about it because they'll be overheard. And so she keeps trying to talk about it, and people are telling her like, shh, and she's all like, why should I have to be quiet? Like, girl, cause do you even understand the position you're in? Oh, gets me so wound up. But then it all gets amplified by the juvenile writing style. It just wasn't the right kind of style for what was happening. And then the cherry on top is our stupid main character gets to the end of the book and suddenly she is smart enough to outwit like all the executioners. I'm sorry, I just had way bigger expectations and they just fell flat, so flat. Okay, the next book is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I gave this one 3 stars. The premise of this book is that we follow Stevie, who is a wannabe sleuth, as she goes and enrolls in Ellingham's Academy, and she wants to go there because the founder, Mr. Ellingham himself, experienced the kidnapping of his wife and daughter, and it was like never solved, so she wants to go and solve it. Now, my biggest critique with this book, I suppose, is that I didn't find it as exhilarating as it could be, and I thought the promise of intrigue and mystique lacked a little bit. So our main character Stevie, I really wanted the whole story to be from Stevie's perspective. Instead we have flashbacks to Mr. Ellingham himself and what he was experiencing. I would have rather if Stevie had told us those herself, or something like transcripts, or we got to read the detective document itself. And the other thing that made me feel a bit meh about the story is the ending. I won't go into it too much because it would be a bit spoilery, but essentially just know that there are 2 mysteries, and by the end of the book none of them are solved. I would understand that for the Ellingham one because it is a series, and that's, you know, you need to have some sort of link between all books. We didn't get the whole way, we didn't get a whole story, so I left feeling quite unsatisfied. My next 3-star read is Thoughts Are Like Poetry by Kautar and Rabti. Apologies again if I'm enunciating that wrong. This is a modern poetry collection that I personally think is on the way to becoming like the type of poetry that I like. I'm slowly figuring it out. It is more hopeful and it breaks the mould of modern poetry a bit more. And Rabti doesn't just, how do I explain this, write 3 words on a page and call it a poem. She at least tries to write a bit more long form, play around with the rhyme scheme a little bit, and I can appreciate that. The parts that held me back from giving it a higher rating is that I thought that the first quarter of the collection, which was about love, was too big, essentially. There was like a big chunk of love and then hope, meditation and something else. So it just felt a bit unbalanced there, as well as a lot of repeated metaphor and imagery, such as gold or emerald eyes was often seen throughout. So just some critique for that, I suppose, is trying to switch up the vocab a bit, especially if you're going to be talking about the same subject matter. Oh, sorry, and I should also mention I gratefully received that as an ACK as well from the author themselves who reached out to me. The next 2 books I read were Volume 2 and 3 of The Demon Slayer by, Koyo Haru Gotog. Oh, I'm so sorry. This is a really fun, quite eventful manga where our main character slays demon, it's kind of in the title, who's also trying to save his sister who was turned into a demon as well. I can't say much about what happened without spoiling things, but just know it got really eventful, introduced to a few more characters, and I loved them all, so that was 4 stars. I also read The Eyes of Tambora by Maria V. Snyder, which was another 4-star read. This story follows our main character, who is essentially female Indiana Jones, except she's part of an oppressed not race, an oppressed group of people called the Sun Cursed. And the Sun Cursed are people who are born with all blonde hair. So like head hair, eyelashes, everything blonde. And they are oppressed because essentially they are believed to have been given up as children to die in honour of the sun goddess, but obviously if they're alive they didn't do that, so it's kind of like they're scum. And we follow her as she tries to uncover this magical talisman which will give the rulers of her city powers. However, and this is where I quite enjoyed this book, it's an underground city. Above ground is a desert that will kill you if you are in the sun during certain times of the day. As the levels go down, the wealth increases because you're away from the heat and closer to the water source, which has slowly been decreasing over the years. And everybody in this city is a person of colour. You don't have people like me. The lightest person I think is described as a honey gold. So everybody has some pigment to their skin in one way or another. Granted, there is a tiny little bit of an issue here with the richest people often being the lightest, but it's not reciprocated, deeper skinned people being more frowned upon. In fact, the people with the deepest skin tones are often seen as religious figures of note, because if you've been out in the sun more, then you're closer to the sun goddess. So there's a really interesting commentary on skin colour in this book, as well as the fact that our main character, who is oppressed, is a metaphor for the oppressed races or religions or people in general. I thought this book was really good in taking me away with the story. There were points where I think things were done too quickly, such as a really quick burn romance, which just I don't think was pulled off very well, which is my main reason for dropping a star. And then I started deviating a bit further from my TBR that I had spun. I decided to try read a lot of my ACTs before the month was up. So the next book, Poptastic is also an ACK, and this one is written by Victoria Holmes. Now, this one, I appreciated the blurb, especially after reading Beach Read. That seemed a lot more true to the story. All it is, essentially, is a massive lesbian chick flick, and it was brilliant. All of our main characters are lesbian. There's just a group of them who are all friends, and there's a whole drama between our main character's ex-girlfriend is getting married, and the fiance isn't happy with the main character being a bridesmaid. Hopefully that made sense. It was dramatic, it was crazy, it really bordered on like absurdism at points with how some of the characters reacted, but I could imagine it on the big screen, gathering a group of my friends around and just having a right old laugh. How silly and stupid some of our main characters were, but the difference is that I felt like they were intentionally ditzy and silly rather than Murder Trending's trying to be smarter than she was kind of fiasco. My biggest critique for that story is that there are some big triggers for attempted suicide and drug abuse and alcohol abuse. One character ends up being in the hospital and is a victim of drug abuse. It felt a little bit like a plot device to progress the story, and there wasn't much conversation around how harmful that was apart from the obvious she got really sick consequence. And that book will be out by the time this video is up, as it is published on the 5th of May. And next I have my 2 5-star reads. First of all is the buddy read that I've been doing with my friend. It is The Final Empire, the Mistborn Book 1 by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in what I think will become a favourite fantasy series of mine that I've currently ever read. I think the characters are super relatable, especially Vin, who starts off as a street urchin, and she has this power, which she hasn't told anybody about, to essentially manipulate one's emotions. But then she is discovered by a band of people who are trying to overthrow this oppressive, manipulative, power-hungry, oh gosh, hello sunshine, ruler? He's not a king yet, a ruler. And then she discovers that she has more than her one power to manipulate or suppress emotions. So she then goes on this quest with this band of people who discovered her, and they essentially become like a band of merry men who then go and decide to fight all evil in the world. At times the magic was a bit confusing to picture in my head. For example, the characters can like jump and push off metal, so once you got your head around that you could picture it, and it became quite a fun scene playing out in your head. But it did take me like a solid 80 pages. So I really enjoyed this, and as soon as my next paycheck comes in, I'm gonna get book 2. And lastly, possibly my favourite book of this month is The Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. This is also an ARC that I thankfully received. Thank you, NetGalley. And this one will also have been released now. Ooh, click. This is Veronica Roth's first adult book, and it follows what happens to the Chosen Ones after everything. Sloane is our main character, whose perspective we see the most. So at this point, all of the Chosen Ones are like 25 to 40 years old, and what's happened is it's 10 years on, they're all really ridiculously famous, but a lot of them are suffering in their own way. Sloane personally is experiencing very traumatic PTSD and depression, and although she's trying to find help for it, she's struggling because other people aren't understanding that she herself isn't happy. Like, yeah, they defeated the Dark One, but that doesn't mean that everything she went through can be ignored, like crazy amounts of murder and personal trauma. She lost family members, that sort of thing. And so it's dark, and she's pessimistic, and other people, like other Chosen Ones, all have their own issues, and it's just a really interesting read. Once we're introduced to the characters, the story goes on with the plot, which is all about the Dark One potentially coming back. But I think the star of the story is Sloane, and just the writing style. Veronica Roth, she can get you really committed to some characters, and if you remember what happened at the end of her Divergent series, then you can imagine how well she gets you connected to these Chosen Ones. And it also gave me Illuminae file vibes in that it uses mixed media. So we have Sloane's main perspective narrative. But then there are also transcripts of interviews between the chosen ones, and there are federal documents that Sloane herself is reading through, which we get to see as well, documenting things like people's therapist appointments, and before the chosen ones were all one group, people trying to recruit them. And it's just a really fun but also dark take on the chosen one trope, and it is just really, really good. Apologies for all the crazy light that's been happening in this video. We are trying to use some natural light, and it's a cloudy autumnal day out there in New Zealand. So thank you for sticking around for this long. If you like this video and want to see some more, please consider leaving a cheeky like and subscribe down below. I hope you all enjoy your reading and all the places you'll go. See you in my next video.